A rock quarry just blocks from a middle school could soon become an asphalt plant. The judge's decision arrived after more than half a decade of deliberation.
On Friday, Circuit Court Judge Lisa Fabiano held a county board approval for the Northern Illinois Services plant. But WIFR's Nathaniel Langley met with those in Rockton still worried about what that industry could bring.
Rockton's potential asphalt plant awaited its fate since 2018. Over time, health and environmental concerns from the community shifted. But many residents feel an asphalt plant doesn't make sense these days.
6 years ago, the argument was that asphalt plant would be needed in this part of the county.
Jim Webster sees the repavement of Winnebago County's farthest west road as proof an asphalt plant is unnecessary.
And so that tells me that anything closer could have been serviced within that area as well.
However, Best Roads Repair isn't the only argument against the plant. 20 miles back in Rockton, the community remembers the Chemtool explosion.
That whole place basically burned to the ground. Again, not because the company was trying to cut corners necessarily, anything like that, but accidents do happen.
Many in the area worry about another accident. Rockton sediment is primed to absorb any materials, hazardous or not.
If something leaks through, there's nothing to grab it. It leaks right into the water table. So all the regulations in the world don't prevent an accident.
But the case required a clear and convincing argument from the plaintiffs. The threshold not met after 6 years in legal limbo.
The way the laws are written to try to overturn a municipal decision, they're difficult to meet.
The judge's decision it's her decision. I can't argue against a judge there.
Northern Illinois Services was unable to provide a response today, but on its webpage, the company claims a commitment to sustainability and environmental protections.
Thank you, Nathaniel. And in her decision, Judge Fabiano states an asphalt plant in Rockton could reduce costs for local construction projects. She also says modern equipment prevents odors from escaping into nearby neighborhoods.